most like me to know about you right now? It's one of my favorite questions. And so I'm asking myself that question, like, what would I most like you to know about me right now? And I think I want to start with a little story about this chair. Steve Paxton, whose name I'm sure most of you have heard, we're all here because in 1972 he brought together a group of athletes and dancers and tried this wild idea on them called contact improvisations. There was an S on it at the beginning. And for a week they worked all day, and at night they watched videotape of what they'd done all day. This was right after the invention of videotape, reel-to-reel videotape. And then the second week, they performed these improvisations all day for a week at the Weber Gallery, where people would come and watch, come and leave. And so at the 25th anniversary of Contact Improvisation at Oberlin College, there was 160 of us there celebrating 25 years of this form. This was 29 years ago. And I was the curator of all the talk events at that event. And Nancy Stark-Smith, another name you might know, said, let's see if Steve will do like a fireside chat with us. And we asked him, and he said, yeah. And so a group of us built a fake fireplace in the dance studio, and we filled it with candles, and we put this wonderful chair by the fireplace. And I had heard that Steve Paxton sometimes does not show up for his talks. And more likely to not show up if he is like the keynote speaker, because he was so fucking ornery. There's a reason he created this form. And so we all came and we were gathered like this around the chair, and he didn't show up. But I had a group of people who knew him well from the Brighton Bush Jam, where he went every year, and I pulled the trigger and I said, go get him. And they were ready to carry him, but they found him in his room. He said, okay, I'm coming. And he came into the room, and he walked up behind everybody, and he said, for 25 years, I have refused to take that chair, and I'm not taking it tonight. And then we all had to turn around and he did the whole talk from this side. But the thing that I want to say is he's the genius of not taking this chair, not making himself the center of our dance form, not making it the Steve Paxton technique, where we have to go through special trainings and pay our dues and follow certain rules. He left the center of the form empty. And what that means is any one of us can take up time in this chair. And so today, I'm the one sitting in the chair. Because it's a chair that we all share. And I'm very happy to be here. And in Toronto, my birthplace. My family, you might not know it, but has had an influence on a lot of your lives. This is my sister Nina Keogh right here, and I'm very happy she came.
Hello.
But our grandparents were puppeteers. Our parents were puppeteers. Nina was the third generation puppeteer. I rebelled. But if you are old enough to remember The Friendly Giant, or the Today Special, or what are some of the others you've been involved with?
Mr. Dress-Up.
Mr. Dress-Up. This was your puppeteer, puppet builder. So many of your childhoods have been touched by the Keogh family. These are my Canadian bona fides, even though I grew up in Mexico. I told the story at the beginning about letting my parents know I was going to be a dancer. I was a priest at the time, and I found contact improvisation, and I went, I'm home. And I gave up the priesthood, a lifetime in the priesthood, to be a dancer. And this was when I called my parents. I said, Mom, Dad, guess what? I'm going to be a dancer. And there was this long silence. Martin, no! And there was another silence. They said, Martin, there's no money in it. And the money had never been the issue for them. It had always been about the creativity and the collaboration. And they finally got to the real point. They said, Martin, I was 22. They said, you're too old. And the fact that we're dancing here, they were both professional ballet dancers in their younger years. And they were forced to retire at a certain age, because back then somebody after 25 was considered over the hill. They only wanted the young bucks and the young gals to come in. And they were both like wounded by the fact they had to stop dancing. And they thought, me starting at age 22? No way. And then they came into a space, it was an ecstatic dance space, I brought them, they came to visit me in Berkeley, and they saw it, and they both jumped on the floor and started rolling around on each other. They were so bruised after, but they loved it. And they understood at that point, okay, get it why you do this dance form. Yeah, I was a Zen priest. I was way too early in my life the director of the Empty Gate Zen Center in Berkeley. Left that to dance. I was introduced to it through ecstatic dance. Didn't know what it was. I was rolling around with people for a year, and then somebody gave me feedback one night. And I went, you mean this is a form? They said, yeah, it's called contact improvisation. And I went, where do I signed up for 3 classes that week, and within a year I was teaching and performing, and that began this big arc with the form. I'm wondering if anybody here has trouble when your uncle or aunt asks you, so what is contact improvisation? Like, how do you describe it to people? It's a really tough question. It's like, oh, something you have to experience. But whenever somebody says, oh, you can't put words to that, I think you're just not being disciplined. And so, for those of you who don't know, I have a book called Dancing Deeper Still, The Practice of Contact Improvisation, which is 30 years of my essays about contact put together. If you want to read some words that are put to the form. And the last third of it is, if you're a teacher of any kind, is teaching pearls, just things I've gathered from different teachers. There was a time when Nancy Stark-Smith and I, we were co-leading contact improvisation teacher exchanges, where teachers would come together and we would exchange what we know. And I love that about this form, that it's not a top-down thing. We share what we know with each other. But she and I, before the first one, we said, okay, we need to come up with a definition for the form. And for weeks we would get on the phone and we would try different things and nothing was right. And one day I said, listen, Nancy, we can't come up with a definition, but can we name the proposition? But can we change the language around it? And she went, oh yeah, let's try that. And we overheard each other say this thing that we then called out, which is that contact improvisation is a frame of skills. And we meet to dance in the empty middle. And this frame, it's this wonderful thing. It's so important, the frame. What we're not doing is building a fat frame so we're dancing skills on skills. Every time we add a skill, we're making the frame bigger so we have a bigger empty middle within which to meet our partner. And so it's really important to know where you are. Am I at a place where I need more skill in my dance? Or am I in a place where I really need to go into that emptiness and see how am I meeting another human being in this dance form, in this conversation? So the proposition being, how do we develop this framework of contact skills so that we can meet and dance in the emptiness? And I love that emptiness is part of this. Okay, one other story, then we'll open it up. Deeply personal to me, I have 4 boys, I'm married, and with Liza for almost 30 years. We've got 4 grandkids. I used to tour all over the world, several continents a year. somebody yesterday came up and said, oh, I studied with you in Nelson, and you know what, Martin? You are the contact improvisation pedagogical genius. And that made my day. But I love both contact, but I also love the art of teaching and how this form gets transmitted. 7 years ago, I was about to go on tour to Kyiv in Ukraine, then Barcelona, then Colorado, then Asheville, North Carolina, and I was sitting breakfast, reading my email, and I suddenly, an elephant stepped on my chest and I had a heart attack. And I was rushed to the hospital, and 3 days later, I came out with 3 stents in my heart. And a few months later, they did the stress test. I said, Martin, your heart's fine. Go out, you're like a bird in a cage, and the door is open, you can fly. But I had torrential fatigue and brain fog. And I had what is now called myalgic encephalomyelitis, used to be called chronic fatigue syndrome. I could not get out of bed more than an hour or 2 a day for 5 years. I was bedridden and lost my livelihood, lost my social life, kind of lost everything except this amazing woman who was right here in my life the whole time. And so I lost this contact with people like you in dance studios all over the world. And it was a huge loss. I mean, I had to do a huge amount of grieving every day. And hope in this illness is not a healthy emotion because so few people go into remission who get it. Curiosity is a really great thing to have with it. But the community on Salt Spring Island, Sasha included, kept saying, come to an event just for a few minutes. Come have a meal at one of the jams. Come do a little talk like this one. And at one of those events, a very dear friend of mine from Austria, Sabine Parzer, she said, Martin, you used to say that residential jams are the closest thing to heaven on earth for you. You used to say that. Go to one and just lay in the cushions and let your mirror neurons work. And so last fall, I went and I laid in the cushions, and before that, I knew I could dance for 19 minutes once a week without crashing. If I danced 22 minutes, I could crash. 19 I could do. By the end of that event, I could dance for an hour a few times a week. And then they said, Martin, in the spring one, they said, come teach a class. So I taught an hour class. And then this summer, it was a 10-day festival. I said, okay, my next big milestone is going to be 5 days. And I went and did 5 days of it, and it went so well. I went home for 2 days and then went for the end. So I was there for 7.5 days of this event. And then Kathleen invited me here to be the elder in residence. I'm seeing if that fits.
He said he would only come if there were a lot of cushions.
Yeah.
And I hadn't thought to bring cushions.
Yeah,
And so that changed the feeling of the event. I'm going to bring cushions every time I run it. It's so good. So thank you, Mark.
Yeah. So it's deeply emotional for me to be here, place near my birth, with my sister. And I thought I would never get to travel on an airplane again, let alone I flew alone this time, and to be in a contact space. So I'm incredibly, there's a lot of emotion here sitting with you. So, any questions?
So when you were touring the world, were you going around doing contact info?